Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen. I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played 11 seasons for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. Come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey. And Tom, I'm at the lake house. We've got the annual family vacation.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Not everybody is here. My daughter Kelsey couldn't make it. For those of who's she's been ill, but she's feeling better. But her husband is down for the count, so he's on the IR. So they decided not to come. But we still feels like we got a full house. I went fishing this morning with my grandkids. All the grandkids got a fish, at least one. So. That was always a good deal. And
how was your patience level when you're out there with the grandkids?
Oh, it's good. I'm the guy that puts the worms on and takes the fish off the hook. And although my wife can do it as well, she came out late in the process, and right when my oldest grandkid had caught a pretty nice sized sunfish, and
nice.
He just grabbed that fish and took that hook out because that's who she is. So
meanwhile, she's like building an addition on the house and cooking a gourmet meal, and
when we were kids, I was just telling the story. I went with my one of my best friends. Their family went to Canada for a couple of weeks up near it was Long Lake out in Bobcage and Lindsay area for those, and we were there a couple of weeks, and we kept track of the number of fish we caught. And fishing in Canada is different. I mean, you throw your hook in, you catch something immediately, and I don't remember exactly what the scores were, but at the end of the 2 weeks, it was there was 4 boys who were fishing, and it was like 412 to 316.
Oh, is that right? Wow.
Oh yeah, we just caught tons of.
Do you ever go smelt fishing?
No, I have not done that. No,
I did that when I was in Northern Michigan. We went up there. Didn't really know what I was doing. I was thought I was Mr. Joe Cool. I was learning to chew tobacco, the leaf tobacco.
Oh, good.
So, again, we did not have a whole lot of money, so we were out there at midnight. We had the little assembly line going. Somebody was catching the fish. Somebody was taking the head off, running the thumb down there, getting the guts out, and then we throw it in the frying pan. But I felt at the same time it was really important for me to learn how to drink Mogan David wine, MD 2020, which is probably like $1 a bottle. And chew the tobacco at the same time, not understanding that by swallowing the tobacco juice, it was not going to be good for me. So it was we were feeding the fish after a while.
I'll bet. Yeah, I've lost my interest. When we were kids, we would clean the fish and fry them up and everything. I'm just not interested in that. I'm a catch and release kind of guy now. I'm just not. I moved beyond that.
So you don't cook. You don't cook up any of the fish that you catch.
No, I mean, I don't know. I was talking about it with my wife. Like, probably if we had a big catch, like if we took the boat out, and it was really good bass fishing on this lake. We have a lot of lily pads and stuff. If we'd ever just kind of go out and really commit to a 2-hour fishing thing, then I might consider it. But mostly we just kind of fish off our dock, and the water gets pretty deep here pretty quick. So even off our dock, you cast out and you're in 12 feet of water or more. So
now, do you understand the logic behind catching fish, like when to do it and where to do it and all that?
No, I'm not. I don't do it enough to understand all that. I know enough that you're better to do it early in the morning or right before dark, mostly early in the morning, but that's about it. What I don't get whatsoever, if you come here in the winter as I do, and you look at our snow-covered lake, there'll always be 6 or 8 shanties, right out in front of me, and in the coldest of times, and the idea of sitting on a canvas chair, staring at a 3-inch hole, waiting for a tip line to.
Oh, I know.
I just do not get it. And people say, "Well, it's the beer." Yeah, but you can drink beer in your house watching, a replay of a hockey game or something.
Oh, I know.
You don't.
Same thing with golf for me. We had a Ranger golf tournament on Monday, and I attended. But I drive around in the cart and make fun of everybody else. Like playing the game of golf for me is just like, oh.
Well, we played golf. It's part of our annual. Ritual is my son and my wife and I go out and play a game of golf, and we played yesterday. Just played 9 holes, but on the last hole, my wife banged home a par putt to beat me. She ended up as the winner yesterday. So But it was a fun time. I don't know why, but yesterday I think was one of our more fun, trips that we had. We had some nice shots, and we had some bad shots too. But it was fun. We had a good time yesterday. Anyway, let's get started on some hockey. I wanted to ask you. I'm part of the Hockey Now group, and we have 11 cities, and we have 11 or 12 or 13, depending on how you look at it, main beat writers. And yesterday they took a head count about which of us were vaccinated, getting prepared for the season, just in case, they say that if you want to cover the team and you want to get in the locker room, you got to be vaccinated. It turns out we're all vaccinated, our entire reporting team. But my question for you is, nothing's been said about this. If you were a hockey player, how would you feel about, us interlopers, coming into the room after the game, and just like it's business as usual? Would you prefer not to have that? Well,
I don't know about today's players, but I can think how I was as a player. I thought I was invincible. I was like, bring it on. I mean, I guess I still feel that way. Come on in. I wouldn't bother me a bit. I just don't think, I think most athletes look at themselves that they're totally healthy, they're strong, nothing's going to get them. That's the way we felt when we played. So it wouldn't bother me.
Yeah. I don't know what they're going to do. It is going to be interesting because it really does change the dynamic. You can't, we're all feeding at the same trough when we're on a Zoom call. And you can't develop relationships. Like, let's just say here in Detroit, I'm going to go to a lot of games and say Lucas Raymond makes the team. Well, I'm not going to get to know Lucas Raymond over a Zoom call.
Yeah.
But if I'm there and I'm there at the morning skates and I'm kidding around with him, and we have a conversation about whether or not he likes American football. 2 weeks later, I can say to him, well, did you watch that Lions game? And he's like, yeah, I'm really getting into it, or something like that.
How does that work then? So you've got to build some kind of a rapport or relationship with the athlete, get to know him other than just the hockey part of it. But let's say he's not playing well and makes a bad play. I mean, you've got to report that. You've got to address that. Yeah,
you do. But, and that's always the question of how you're going to report that. I'm a real straightforward reporter. I don't see any reason to pile on. I say my piece. If the guy's not playing well, I say he's not playing well. But, I'm not, it's a different reporting world now than when I started. We're much more into interpretive analysis, what's going on. Beat writers are expected. And I don't have any problems with this, grading players, for example, at the quarter pole mark or the halfway point. And that makes sense to me. Who's better qualified than the guy that kind of follows them around all the time and pays attention to them? But, you also have to make, sometimes reporters call now for coaches to be fired. And to me, I always thought that was sort of the bailiwick of the columnist, the columnist who comes in now and then, not the guy who's there all the time. Because if you call for the coach to be fired and he isn't, you're still there. And you have to, they don't see that. And, it's tricky. Have you ever had times where the player or the coach, you've said something about them and they get mad at you and confront you? Oh, yeah, for sure. Through the years that's happened. I've had some significant ones. Andy Murray was not pleased with me one time over a column that I wrote years ago about, the players were unhappy with how he sort of treated them. It was kind of like a college type atmosphere, leaving notes under the door. And I heard that about him. Yeah, all those kinds of things. And he called me and he was unhappy and said, it wasn't as bad as I portrayed. And he said, and I wonder where you got that. And the funny part of that story is, and I can tell this because he would never remember what it was, but he was trying to guess who it was. And he, at one point said, well, it couldn't be this guy. And that's who it was. So you never told him though, right? Oh, no. And I won't even to this day. Right. You remember Frank Brown that wrote for Daily News. Sure. Right? Daily News here in New York. So early in my career, I think it was when Herb Brooks first got here. And I think Frank was pretty close with Herb. I wasn't playing well. And Frank wrote an article stating that. And, Frank was a real professional, right? I thought he was. I don't know. Your opinion wasn't very good. And he wrote a very accurate story that I wasn't playing well. I sulked for about a month. I wouldn't talk to him. I sulked like a little baby. And he finally came to me
And to his credit, and I've thanked him for this several times when I've seen him, that he came to me, Tom, it's first of all, it's my job to report that you're not playing well. I think you're a fantastic player. I don't think you're playing as well as you could. You should be playing better. That's what I wrote. And I remember thinking to myself, I guess he's right. It was like he really actually helped. I don't think his intent was to help me. Maybe it was, but he was very accurate and ready wrote both of the way I was playing. Then once I started playing better, he addressed that I was playing better. So it was he was good, very good.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, not always. But I've had really good relationships with players even after being critical. And some of them just, have said to me, I appreciate the fact that you just, put out what the facts were, and again, you didn't pile on. Didn't belabor the point.
I like Larry Brooks as a writer. I think he's fantastic, and he treats everybody the same way. He doesn't, pick and choose who he gives somebody a hard time, but he gets after guys pretty good. Like he piles on a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah, I would say so. That's been his style, and I agree with you. I have the utmost respect for Larry Brooks because he doesn't.
Doesn't pick and choose.
You are.
Yeah.
He just he does his thing, and he just wants to report the news as he sees it. He wants to offer his opinion. He's been around a long time. He knows a lot of different people. He's usually on the inside of things because he's been around. So
Susan Brooks again, a good point by her. Jay Greenberg.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that up. Yeah, I will talk about Jay Greenberg. I wrote a column about him this week. I also wanted to mention that you brought Frank Brown, who of course is a Hall of Fame writer as well. Yeah. Worked so many years for the Daily News. Actually covered the 1980 Olympics. A lot of people don't know that. He was a young reporter for the Associated Press, and then of course had a great career at the NHL, where he was almost like Gary Bettman's traveling secretary, for the lack of a better. He was a speech writer. He was there to advise him on media issues, and they became friends. But I wanted to bring up that Frank lost his wife recently.
I didn't know that.
For those of you who know him, if in case you haven't heard, he's such a tremendous guy, and it was one of the saddest stories that I've heard in a long time. He and his wife, met late in life. They had Frank had retired, moved to Boston. He had become so involved with her grandkids, and it's just a sad story.
That, I didn't know
that he lost her. So my condolences to Frank. And if you know him, drop him a line, because
I'm going to, for sure. Yes, I didn't know that. Thank
you. He's a wonderful man, a very wonderful man. Now, Jay Greenberg, I wrote a column about him. I got a couple of stories about him that I will remember. Back when I first started at USA Today, I was allowed pretty much to go wherever I wanted to go, and I took advantage of that. I was trying to establish my name, USA Today, planting the flag for USA Today so they knew who we were. And of course, we were being delivered to every hotel, so most of the players certainly knew what it was. So, I would leave on a road trip and go to Calgary and Edmonton. You got to remember Wayne Gretzky was king back there when I started, so I wanted to get enough Gretzky time as I could. Then I'd go from there to maybe LA or some other place, and then work my way back home. But I also had a young family, and so when I was home I tried to stay home for a while, and I needed to go to games. Well, Philadelphia, which was a very good team, Mark Howe and McCrimmon were on defense one year. They set some sort of record for plus minus, and they have a good team. And so I would drive the 2.5 hours from my home in Falls Church, Virginia, to Philadelphia pretty regularly because I needed to be at games, and they'd play during the week, and I could spend time in my own bed. Well, I got to know Jay very well, and we became friends. But he just couldn't stop teasing me about the fact that I could go anywhere, and he'd come in and he goes, "Really, Kevin? Philadelphia versus New Jersey. You can go any place, and this is the game you chose. Couldn't you found a better game than this?" And then we'd roar, and then I'd shake his hand, and we'd reintroduce ourselves. And no matter where we were, if I ran into a Pittsburgh or everything, he'd go, really, Kevin? This is the best game you could find. This game right here. And we did this for 30 years. That was always doing it. The one time I did get him was in the Stanley Cup final, when New York had won at the Game 7. And I saw him before he could open his mouth. I said, "No, there is no better game that I could go to tonight than
That's good.
This game." And the other thing I remember about him, he had a great sense of humor. And it reflected in his writing and also just in the way, he talked to you regularly. And the writing phase of it, I remember, was one of my favorite leads back years ago, 1980. Shel Samuelson was struggling for the Flyers defensively. Hadn't found his mobility yet. He ended up being a pretty good, dependable defenseman. But early on, there were struggles as he tried to sort through the speed of the league and, get his sorted out, get his defensive coverage sorted out. And fans were on him. They were on him tough. And Jay Greenberg, and this brings into what you were talking about before, wrote a column, and his lead was something of the effect like, Shel Samuelson, and this is true, is a trained carpenter. Therefore, he has the skill to build the gallows by which Philadelphia fans would like to hang him today. And that was his lead. Now, but that may seem like piling on, but if you read the story, it was about the struggles he had and how he had tried to correct it, how the booze were impacting him. And it was a relatively sympathetic story about what Shel Samuelson was going through. So, this is a guy that told it like it was, using a very clever lead.
That's good. That's good.
But it was a story that I think probably Shel Samuelson didn't mind, because it gave him his say and kind of what was going on. And then off the ice, what I remember about Jay is we were sitting in a press box in Pittsburgh. I don't remember what playoff series it was, but the Penguins, I don't even know what game it was in the series, had a 2-goal lead late in the third period. And, writers have to start writing before the game is over. So I said to Jay, well, I guess we can, this one's probably in the bag. We can start writing. And he goes, nope, 2-goal lead. Larry Murphy has 3 shifts left. We got to wait.
That's good. Poor Larry Murphy. Larry Murphy's a Hall of Famer too, but I know people.
He was. He is a Hall of Famer, and he was a great player. You talk about players coming up to you. Larry, I remember when he was working for Pittsburgh, once stopped me in the hallway, and he shook my hand. He said, "Kevin, I really appreciate that you have written," and I did write this. I remember that he was such a valuable player to Pittsburgh. Because he was the only person who did what he did. Like, if Lemieux went down, they did have Yager, and they seemed to have a replacement for everyone else. But if Larry Murphy went down, they didn't really have another good offensive defenseman like him. And that would have really disrupted their power play and their transition to get the puck up to the big boys. So anyway, but I do remember Jay saying that. And it's a terrible loss. 71 is young. In my opinion, now when people are living into their 80s and, having good and full lives. So I was very sad to hear that as well. And again, another Hall of Fame writer, very, very, very clever writer. Very
good guy too. I remember him. He's just a fun guy. He's one of those guys when you walk in the room, you really enjoyed talking to him. There's some that you kind of wanted to avoid. But hey, really quick, you mentioned Shel Samuelson. I played with him in New York for a little bit, and it was funny because he's a big, gangly guy. I remember the basketball player Manute Bol.
Oh yeah,
Manute Bol. So we called Shel Bol because he was like the Manute Bol of hockey, Shel Bol, and I don't know if he even understood us because he just coming over. I don't think his English is very good. And he just, me, we had chatterbox all the time. And he'd look at me sometimes like, what is wrong with you? We had a golf tournament on Monday too. Alumni from the Knicks and alumni from the Rangers were there for this JP Morgan Chase tournament. JP Morgan Chase is a big sponsor of the Rangers, and they put this tournament on. And Eddie Hospodar came in, and we got talking about the old days. So Eddie had played here in New York as well, and then he got traded. I think he went to Hartford first and then ended up in Philadelphia. And Mike Keenan was coaching in Philly. We're playing a game in Philadelphia, the warm-ups before the game. And there's a few of us that were, teammates with Eddie and Fred and say, so we start shooting pucks at Eddie's feet. So he's down in the Philadelphia zone warming up, and we're in our zone. We're shooting pucks at him, in the feet. And And Keenan, Eddie was due to play in the game, but Keenan saw this happening during warmups, and we didn't need this to happen. But he pulled Eddie out of the lineup. He would play him. He was so mad. He says, "You have fun with your friends out there, or whatever." And so
Wow.
we were happy Eddie wasn't playing because he didn't care who it was. He was going to come after you no matter what. But
Wow.
so it's pretty funny sitting around telling stories. He actually told a long story about remember the brawl they had, the pregame brawl that Philly had in Montreal in the playoffs.
Oh, for sure, yeah, legendary.
Well, he was going on telling how that was Mike Keenan. He premeditated that. He wanted that to happen. They actually had five extra guys dressed for the warmups that weren't going to play. So they had more guys than Montreal did for the brawl. It was pretty interesting him telling the stories about it.
Wow. Yeah, getting back to the hockey rink, there's a good story that came out, at least I found it fascinating, written by Pavel Barda in the Czech Republic about Jaromir Jagr, who's going to turn 50 and he's still playing, for the team that he actually owns.
Kladno, right?
Yeah, Kladno. And he basically said that he feels like he has to play. That the survival of the team is dependent upon all the sponsors that he brings in because he's playing. They want to be involved with him, and he feels like he wants to keep this team going. And in terms of its survival, like he feels like he has to play. And I think I had the impression that he's somewhat embarrassed that he's playing. And
the quote he had was, "Only God will judge me."
Only God will judge me is what he said. I actually felt sorry for him as I was reading that because he knows he's not the same player he was, although he's still productive. And I wrote a piece basically about as good as Jagr was last year. I think he had 12 points in 19 games after he came back from his injury, and that's how many games he played. I said he still can't hold a candle to Gordie Howe. Now, Gordie Howe in his last season, when he turned 52, had 16 goals.
Yeah,
it was the 1980s, so there was more scoring, but still, he was in the top 24% of the players in the league in scoring. He was still playing. Excuse me, I said 16, it's 15. And he really had an excellent last season. Right. But I want to bring it around to you. You played. I know I've asked you this before. Would you have played into your 50s?
Well, it's interesting, right? Like you even had Joe Thornton. I know he's not 50, but he's now signed up again with Florida Panthers, right? So he's continuing to play. Like that is, it's funny because, now when you leave the game, you say to yourself, okay, did I get everything out of my career that I wanted to? Set aside the money. We played, money wasn't the issue anyways. But, I've dreamt all my life of getting to the National Hockey League. Did I get the most out of my career? And there's not many guys. Like I remember in the agent business, I had Dallas Drake as a client. And, he only won the one Stanley Cup. And I don't think, he's not going to be in the Hall of Fame or anything like that. But based on his skill level, I think he really got the most out of his career. He's one of those guys you look back, like he gave it everything he had pretty much every game. He's a physical player, way more physical than I thought he was going to be coming out of college. So I look at guys like, Joe Thornton still playing and Zdeno Chara, whatever ultimately he does, and Jagr still playing. I think, I think part of his injuries too. So I hurt my back. And I didn't take care of it properly either. I didn't understand, strengthening your core and stretching as much as I should have. So it just got to the point it was just, not just the pain itself, but it was mentally painful to play because you weren't just enjoying the game anymore. You're always worried about getting hurt, coming back from injury and everything. So, and again, I think that's a byproduct of, knowing more about it. So knowing the way the players are now, what they know about training, what I know about training now, I would have played as long as I could have. I think there's sometimes, I saw where Thornton signed with Florida. I'm like, how does that look on Joe Thornton, right? Everybody respects him so much. He's had such a great career. But you know what? I admire him. He said, listen, I'm not done yet. First of all, I haven't won a Stanley Cup yet. Florida could be the team that wins a Stanley Cup. Who knows? For me, if I was to go back and do it again, I would play as long as I could. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I think that says a lot about Florida, that Joe Thornton lived there. And I agree with Joe. I think Florida, Bill Zito, and I've crowed about him in the past as well. I think he did a phenomenal job coming in his first year. I've actually written columns where I said, one of the things we always say is, well, you can't trade the whole team. Well, don't tell Bill Zito that. Yeah, he pretty much changed more than half of that roster in 1 year.
Certainly changed the culture of that team a lot too, right?
Yeah, for sure he did. And he has done a remarkable job. And I think the fact that Joe Thornton, who, as you pointed out, is still searching for his cup, chose to go with Florida kind of speaks volumes about that team. I think he can help them. As a bottom six forward, he still has the savvy. He's still a high IQ player in terms.
And he's getting a little grit to him too as he's gotten older. I think he's gotten even grittier, right? Like getting involved in stuff. Yeah,
well, he's angry. He doesn't like getting old. So nobody does.
No. All right, our boy. We have to put this up here. So our boy Ron Greshner is feeling much better now. So he's got a very important question. Who is the better stick handler, Laidlaw, Eddie Hospodar, or Chris Katsopoulos?
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, I was by far the best stick handler. There's no question. Chris Katsopoulos was a skilled player. Like he was that big man. Like he could shoot the puck, pass the puck. He knew the game pretty well too. So I'd have to give it to Katsi actually.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to go back. I'm trying to think. What was it?
You know what? There's a great question that somebody asked here. I can't remember who it is, but they asked. We were talking about writers and people. Who was the biggest influence on you coming up as a young person wanting to be a writer?
Oh, well, actually, it was a guy who wrote some hockey, but it wasn't a hockey writer. It was Joe Falls, and who was the columnist in Detroit. Joe Falls was primarily known as a baseball writer, but he was a columnist in my youth, and I read him, every day, and I just loved the way he wrote. And he was an old school guy, originally from New York, played stickball, he wrote with a real love of what he did. And even after he became a columnist, he would come back every year and allow the baseball writer to take a 2-week in-season vacation, and he would cover the Tigers. And when he covered the Tigers, his prose sang like opera. It was just so, you really had an understanding of what was going on with the team.
Is that something that you learn? Like you go to school to be like that? You have a certain gift or combination?
Well, it's a combination. I think you do need. What you really need is experience. And I tell young kids all the time. By the time I come out of college, and you can't do this anymore, but I had already written 1,000 stories. I had written for 2 or 3 different newspapers. When I was 18 years old, I got my first newspaper job coming out of high school, where I was, covering high school football and stuff. And that's what it comes down to. You just have to cover so many stories that everything comes natural to you, and you have to work at it. It's like anything else. You got to want to push yourself. If your goal when you're writing is to be done, you're in the wrong business. Your goal should be to write, a story that's informative, entertaining, that draws people in. And, it's like any other profession. There are days when you have it and days when you don't. I always told people too, young writers, is that you got to get to the point where the worst you're ever going to be is adequate. You can't ever have a day so poor that you embarrass yourself. Right. So you've got.
It's interesting because I went and spoke last night in front of a high school football team in New Canaan, Connecticut, and I hadn't really been in front of people speaking. I've done a lot of stuff online during the pandemic. I've been out, but this was I was putting on a presentation. They came to see me, and I did find at first I was a little rusty, right? I was not totally sharp. Then once you got going like 15, 20 minutes into it, I really felt, my pace again. I really caught. And again, it's funny, I remember when I first started doing the motivational speaking, when you go to a class like high school kids, it's at 5 o'clock at night. The last thing they want to do is sit there and listen to somebody lecture them, right? So when you make some statement that you think is a profound statement or is funny, whatever, and they just give you the stone cold, like looking at you like just, you've got to remember, don't rely on their reaction to what's going on, right? It's got to be you making things happen. So it was pretty cool last night.
Well, the other thing with younger people is that, they're this new generation is completely different than your generation. And some things that you think are going to land well don't.
Yeah, true.
It's just kind of hard to sort of figure that out now. And you can make pop culture references that we can make nobody's ever heard of. So it's kind of a tricky business. I can see where, and if you haven't done it in a while. Public speaking is is scary. Like
it can be. If you know what, it's true. Like when I first started, and the whole True Grit Life thing was more like a 9 to 5 job for me. So I had to prepare a speech. I was going out, but now I've evolved into where it's just my lifestyle all the time. So I feel less like I have to prepare. I have pressed. I need to know what I want to talk about with specific topics, but I feel like I live it so much now that it's easier. But I do remember, going out. The high school kids, for some reason, they can be. Like they intimidate you almost. It's like they give me that stone cold look. There's no reaction to it. You're the adult crowd. I mean, they're gonna laugh a little bit more at some of the stuff you say, but yeah, they're interesting.
Yeah, no, and I've done some school classes as well, and plus they're not as interested. I remember, and this has been years ago even, but going back to my my college, and I wandered through the school newspaper. Now. At that point, I was, the nation's hockey writer for USA Today. I'd been doing it for 20 years. And I would have thought that somebody in that office, because people knew that I was there and who I was and what I was doing. And I would have thought that some of these young reporters would have wanted to talk to me. And nobody did.
Yeah.
Now, when I was going there, if someone who had been in the business 20 years had wandered through the room, there would have been 10 of us who had it pinned against the wall.
Sure.
Trying to tap his brain, doing the Vulcan mind probe. How do we get into this? How do we be good? How do we get to the USA Today or Detroit Free Press or the news? Or
well, it is true because I mentioned Herb Brooks' name and some of the influence he had on me. And the coach, the high school football coach, stopped and said, "How many people here know who Herb Brooks is?" And I didn't think of that. Nobody put their hand up. They didn't know who Herb Brooks was.
No.
So yeah, we had to tell them who he was. Yeah.
Yeah. No. It's you think. Although sometimes it surprises you, we did my colleague Bob Tuff did a story about the fact that Red Savage, a recent draft pick of Detroit Red Wings, when he met the media, wore kind of like a floppy hat that had a Red Wings logo, but it made him look like Gilligan of Gilligan's Island. And Bob just wrote a piece basically saying that, and we did the picture. And I told him, I'm not so sure that's going to work because today's people aren't going to know Gilligan. But apparently there's enough syndication that it actually did work. And that people, passed it along, those who did find it, trying to get it to the right 65-year-olds. And
so this was a current draft pick?
Yeah, just happened.
And what's his name?
Savage. It's Brian Savage's kid.
Oh, and what's his first name?
I think they call him Red.
Yeah, you said Red. Red Savage. Oh, no, what a name that is.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it's it did real well, but it's hard. You got trying to get the pop culture.
Yeah.
You basically, when you're doing, I gave a commencement speech at my high school, and I remember when I was writing that speech, coming up with, references they could relate to. And I remember when I was done, I went back to it and I looked at it and I said, well, they're not going to know what this is.
Yeah.
You're not going to know what this is. And, I get back and I had, maybe one or two that I thought would work across all generations. But, so it's tricky trying to get it. And, the other thing that's different, and I remember reading this years ago, and it's really true. There used to be a standardization of education that you knew everybody would know this certain book or this certain movie or whatever. You can't count on that anymore. We're a very diverse population. We're out of people, my former boss, like I'm a television addict. I watch, I love movies. I love television series.
And on that subject, so go ahead. I'll let you go ahead. Ted Lasso.
We'll talk about Ted Lasso when I'm done. But my former boss at USA Today, he was very young. He was, in his early 30s. He watches no TV, zero. Has no didn't have any idea about the Game of Thrones or any of the series and everything. Just sports. He watches sports and he does a lot of reading and plays a lot of sports, but he just doesn't watch any television other than sports. So I think he watches news too. But anyway, so it is a little bit different. But Ted Lasso, some people have called that the best television series they've ever seen. It really is good. Yeah,
I've never seen it.
It's. The one thing I tell people is, it's about soccer, but soccer is just the backdrop.
Oh, I've heard about this. Yes.
Yeah. So it's really good. It's hard to describe, but, it's about a American football coach who's hired to go over to coach a Premier League soccer team or football to them in England. And he's just a remarkably nice man. And it's about him trying to win over his athletes and the fan base. And early on, they, like, even the fans realized they like him, but they still stop and say, Coach, it's good to see you again, but you suck as a. I
heard somebody else told me about it.
Yeah. And
let me ask you a question. So what would be, if you had one annoying habit that other people do in your presence, what would that be? Either like talking to you or the way they handle themselves? I have one. I'll let you know what it is.
Give me yours and I'll just.
Well, mine is, so especially when somebody asks me a question and you're in the middle of answering the question and they want to interrupt you. Like they get so excited they can't wait for you to finish. They want to speak. I don't know why that's.
You run into people too who are always looking for a pause in your thing so they can get in, even if it's not a question. Like they're just waiting for what they're going to say next.
Yes, they're really not listening to what you're saying. They're waiting for this. And then when you're having a conversation with somebody like that, you tend to, that's happening, so you keep talking. Right?
I can tell you too. One of the most what embarrasses me is when I'm talking or telling a story and you can see your audience fading. Like the story is not hooking them. And so like they're turning their head a little bit to see what's happening behind you. And you're thinking,
checking the iPhone. Looking at the watch.
Oops, I missed on this one. So for
that is true.
But Ted Lasso, it really is a quality show. I think you would enjoy it too. The relationship between coach and players is really interesting. And there's just a lot about it. It's pretty multi-layered in its approach. I'm up to date on it. The way they drop one of those a week. Well, now we're in season 2, and my wife and I have pretty much watched them on time. My daughter, Kelsey, who's in South Carolina, was also into this as well. Her and her husband, because she's not working because of her illness, they watch them during the day because they're available starting at midnight on that day, and they usually watch it at his lunch hour, or something. So people are totally into this, and
I've heard a few times.
People make comments on social media all the time about it, and of course, there's always some measure of controversy. Some people have said,
when people produce those kinds of shows, do you think they know in advance, okay, this is going to be a hit?
I think sometimes they believe it is, but there have been things that I think people have put out who thought they were going to be great and they didn't. And I read a story about they talked to publishers about the Harry Potter series, and one of the guys who apparently had a great memory talked about all the different writers who had series like that they were pitching. And, why did that one work and others didn't? Fantasy series involving younger people. And she was rejected a couple of times with it, Rowling, who wrote it. No one really knows. Why did, they wrote a novelette about Seabiscuit. Wasn't it Seabiscuit? I think it was. And they made a movie out of it. Why were people interested in that horse? I mean, you really don't, you don't know, for sure what would capture the imagination of people. And, like who would guess, like if you said to say, okay, we're going to do this television series and it's going to be about an American coach going to coach English soccer, going, I don't know. I've got friends who are non-sports fans who love that series.
Ron Grester's sharp today. He's back. He's like he and Susan are fighting it out here. Rocky. That was another movie that people didn't really. Nobody really thought it was going to be
a great one. Who knows? I mean, it was what.
Seinfeld almost got canceled.
Yeah. There's a lot of shows that you don't know, and then there are some I think that people put them on, and you read stories where the director said, the first time I saw these two people on screen, I knew it was going to be,
perfect. How about remember MASH? That was a great show too. They ran for a long time. MASH.
Yeah, MASH was, kind of ahead of its time too, because a very serious subject, and yet they found ways to, bring humor to it, and the characters were likable, memorable, and all that kind of stuff. So,
I remember. I think I was in college. I think it was a senior in college when they had the finale. That was a huge thing, right? Like everybody was rallying around the TVs to watch the finale of MASH.
Well, when that came out, I remember I was working for a small paper, and I remember that one of our writers wanted and successfully ordered, and there's one of the episodes about ordering ribs from Adam's Rib in Chicago, which did exist. And he wanted to, for the finale, to order Adam's Ribs, so he could, eat Adam's Ribs and watch the finale. And
right.
Then the whole shtick is they forgot the coleslaw. So I don't remember whether my colleague got the coleslaw, but I know he ordered Adam's Ribs out of Chicago to watch the finale.
What would be, I know we're running out of time. We've gone overtime here, but if there's one restaurant that you could eat at, your best restaurant that you want to eat at, what is it? It'd be a chain.
I'm sure there is one.
I like a nice steakhouse, like there was Sparks and all those kind of places in Manhattan here. Nice, steakhouse. Oh, nice charbroiled porterhouse steak. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, you don't eat steak anymore, do you?
No, really. I pay maybe once every 2 months I'll have red meat. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. You had pork chops a couple of times, and my son who's here, and I don't get to see him even though he only lives in Chicago. Mm-hmm. But I don't. It's not like I get to see him 50 times a year. So we were sitting around, we were just talking about, he's turned into kind of a cook. He's got his mom's talent, and asked him about his daughter said he makes a mean pork chop, and he likes the double cut pork chops. And he said, I asked him whether he'd ever stuffed his pork chops, and he said, he has, but they've never come out. He said, in concept, they sound great.
Right. Yeah.
But he said when you execute them, they're not.
Susan is such an intelligent woman.
I
just admire her. She's like an intelligent, tasteful woman. Experienced.
Yeah. I do. I will say this: when my wife and I have been over to Europe a few times, because I'm such a, I had so many Marriott points that it was inexpensive for us to take a vacation in Europe, oftentimes, and so we did. We've been to Italy, and we've been. Had long trips to Germany and France, and we've been to, the UK and so forth. And I love eating at European restaurants. I really do. And I'm really, and I think, it'd be nice if we could do this, because I think we'd be a healthier society, says the fat sports writer. If we ate the way they do over there, which the portions are so small. Like, I remember eating, and they offered a 7-course meal at this Italian restaurant that we were in, and but one course was like 2 asparagus, 2 pieces of stalks, and the spaghetti portion of it was just a small little plate with maybe a half cup of spaghetti, and that meal, which was fantastic, by the way, probably was less food than you would get if you went to there's a place in Michigan that's known for its large helpings. Like they put 1 pound of bacon on a BLT, and those kind of things.
And you're right. That's so unhealthy. We've conditioned ourselves to think that that's the way we're supposed to eat, is those big portions right over here. That's So some people got shot in front of Sparks. So Ron's joke here is people were dying to get into the Sparks Steakhouse.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
You've done better than that, Ron. Come on. It's okay, but you've done better than that.
Anyway, well, we have gone way too long on this, although I thought it was an interesting show. Or maybe I was just interesting, and maybe out there they're doing that thing where I get worried where they're checking their phones or looking past you, or
taking a nap.
Yeah, whatever. So anyway, we appreciate you joining us. And if you want to read me, I'm at Detroit Hockey Now or HockeyBuzz.com. I actually have a column about Jay Greenberg if you want to read that. And Tom?
And if you guys want to listen to the radio version of the show, you can go to radio.co and go to channel 365 Sports. Again, that's radio.co 365 Sports. We will see you guys on Monday.